Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 3 of the $20orLESS podcast. We are recording live on February 8th, 2015, and I'm your host, JD, aka Gaddock Teeg, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Cosmic Engine. How you doing today, Cosmic?
I'm okay. I'm awake now, so it's all good.
When awake is an accomplishment, you know you're going to have a great day.
Oh, yes.
So, what have you been up to? What have you been playing? What's been going on with you?
I've been playing this week. Nothing that I haven't already mentioned on last week's podcast. I've started playing. The only new thing that has been eating my time is Dying Light. I finally got my hands on a review code of Dying Light a week after launch.
Yeah, I mean, they sent those codes really late, right?
They didn't send them till launch, and I was kind of worried that it was going to be. It was one of those things where they were holding back review codes because it was a bad game.
Right.
But it seems to be kind of like the normal thing for Warner Brothers published games now. Right. It's like they did it with Shadow of Mordor, which was a great game. Yeah. And I'm not. I don't know why they do it. Because to me, as a critic, it says to me that you don't have confidence in your game, or that you kind of, because a lot of companies that do that, they kind of don't give out pre-release codes.
Right.
Usually have something to hide, or basically what they're trying to do is stop critique before the game comes out so that people will buy the game blind, and they'll get more sales. But surprisingly, with the last two Warner Brothers games, that hasn't been in terms of the actual games have been good.
Right.
So I'm not sure why they do it. And it kind of annoys me a little bit because I'm like, it annoys me on principle because you're stopping reviewers getting the code so that they can put out a review on launch so people can actually be informed about the game. But I don't know why they what the logic is behind why they do it. Because if you're producing good games, what's your problem? Why don't you just let people take a look at it?
Right. And there's the other thing that I was thinking with that is that maybe, was there a day one patch? Because that's the other thing I go to with those, is that they had some kind of game-breaking bug that were like, we'll fix on day zero with a patch, and they didn't want to get it out to reviewers without having that fixed.
I don't know. I mean, I heard somewhere that there was possibly some bugs that they didn't want in the build, and that they that was maybe why, but that's not a good enough reason for me, because as a reviewer, we kind of know that there's going to be, especially with games now, that there's I mean, every launch there's like a day one patch. Like every game has a day one patch for some reason. So I don't think that's a good enough excuse not to give a review code out to reviewers.
Yeah, and that's one of the things where they can tell you, hey, look, we have this bug in there. That's done all the time, right? Where they tell you, this bug is in there, we know about it, we're going to have it fixed in a day one patch, so don't really worry about that.
I get that a lot with reviews. Companies will say to me, oh, here's the review code, just to let you know that there's this specific issue that we know about, and that will be fixed on day one patch. And I'm like, well, that's fine. Okay.
Right. Yeah, so this week I've kind of done the same thing and playing a lot of stuff I've been talking about in the previous weeks. The other game that I've talked about was Advance Wars on the Wii U Virtual Console. I finally beat that this week. The game is as good as I remember it. It's a little shorter than I remember it, but I think that's because I remember that game being really hard as a kid, but that game is not that hard. And I remember certain things that I thought I knew about the game I definitely just did not understand. Like, I thought the infantry captain, or the infantry CO, whoever it was, Sammy, I thought she was, like, the worst. Why would anyone ever use her? But she caps at double the rate, so she captures structures much faster than everybody else. And her mech units, which are crazy OP, I did not think they were OP as a child. The mech units are just awesome. So Sammy just makes the game so much easier.
So you have a Wii U?
I do have a Wii U. I purchased it Christmas. They had the sale where you got like the Wii U and a couple games for $300, I thought. And $300 for a console these days, I thought was pretty damn good.
I think you're like the only person I know who actually has a Wii U.
It's a really good system, and it has some really good games on it. It just doesn't have a variety of games.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of games come out this year that like got really good reviews and stuff, like Bayonetta 2.
Bayonetta 2, yeah, it's a great game.
And it was quite surprising because like when the Wii U launched, like everyone kind of went, "Oh dear, like there's nothing coming out for this."
Yeah.
And then this year, kind of Nintendo have kind of started to push out some really good games, which is more than can be said for Xbox One and PlayStation 4 because they have nothing at the moment.
I know. It's a real shame. And the Nintendo, I think, has the best virtual console because they have a swath of old school games that I love. So, I mean, maybe that's just my bias towards Nintendo, but I love all the virtual console games that they have up there.
I don't know. I stick to PC. It's the best way.
Well, I mean, that's also the best way. I have a PC as well, clearly. So let's go into the news since we haven't really been playing a whole lot else other than Darkest Dungeon, but we'll talk about that in the last part of the show. So news-wise, also a light news week. We'll start off with a follow-up from a story we covered last week. Ubisoft has decided to reinstate some of the fraudulently obtained keys that they turned off last week. Last week, you may remember that they said, anyone who purchased a key from one of these third-party sellers, you're done. We're going to ban you, permaban, you can't play the game. Now they have decided to reinstate the players who had already activated keys. So if someone had bought the game and started playing it, they decided that you are allowed to play the game, but if you've purchased it and never activated it, then you're out. So it kind of screws over the third-party sellers themselves, so they can't really get away with selling the software anymore. But if you've already purchased the game, you've probably already installed it, and then you can continue to play the game. What do you think about this?
I think it's fine. I think it's a way of Ubisoft saying, like, you know, we're not trying to hurt consumers. Like, we're not after gamers. Like, it's the third-party sellers, so they're kind of... Because at the end of the day, like, so there will be those people who bought keys from those sites thinking that they were legitimate sites. I would assume. Right. And so I you know, it's Ubisoft's way of kind of saying, well, you know, we're not actually trying to hurt, you know, gamers who spent money on the game. We're just trying to stop the crime. So, you know, it's fine. It's a nice gesture from them, I guess. So.
Yeah, I also think it's a good way for them to say, hey, look, we're aware that these third-party sites exist. We don't like them. Maybe in the future we may come down harder on this. We're clearly willing to ban players from using these keys, but you guys, you've already started playing the game. You obviously want to support us because you bought a key instead of just pirating it. So let's work with you, and we'll kind of figure out some kind of middle ground we can come to here. Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, it's a statement of intent from Ubisoft against third-party sites. I mean, it's basically saying, look, this is what we'll do. So it's kind of, and I don't think it's a statement of intent to third-party sites per se, but what it's trying to say, it's trying to let gamers know that if you buy keys from this site, then, you know, it's not going to work.
Right.
So it's trying to take away the business directly.
Right, yeah, for sure. And another follow-up story that was breaking this week is Massively, one of the joystick sites that we reported on last week as well. Joystick was closing down by AOL. They have decided to band together and put together a Kickstarter with Massively OP. You can find the link in the show notes, but it looks like they're going to try and do this thing on their own, which is pretty cool.
Good on that. I knew this was going to happen. I have to say, it's kind of, I mean, it's one of those things. It could have or could have. I'm dying. It could have or could have not happened, but I think that it was always kind. I expected Massively in particular to go down that route.
Yeah, and you know, I've had a problem with some of the joystick sites. You know, they've kind of been clickbaity. WoW Insider, I thought, was particularly not a great site, but Massively has always been a very good site. I thought. I think Massively is a very enjoyable read. They have a lot of great writers who really care about the games that they cover. So I really hope this does well. And if you want to support it, if you like Massively, go to this Kickstarter and give them a couple bucks.
Yeah, I mean, they've already reached their goal now. As of today, they've reached their first $50,000 goal, I think it was. So they're going to be putting up stretch goals quite soon. So I'm pleased to say that, because I think Massively was, a very useful site, because there's not many sites that focus specifically on MMOs.
Yep.
In terms of the quality that Massively provided. There's plenty of sites that do MMO games, but
especially the smaller MMOs. I mean, they cover every single MMO basically, and you will find news stories on pretty much every single MMO. So you don't get that anywhere else. That's a very unique thing that Massively does. And yeah, as you said, they have beaten their $50,000 goal with 26 days to go. So I'm sure they'll smash that.
Yeah, they'll be all right.
They'll be quite all right for some time.
Good on them.
Yeah, good on them. Hopefully the quality continues and they continue to be a great site. And then the final story this week was a little bit of controversy involving a Southeast Asian LoL tournament. The tournament name is Garena. You may have seen this, kind of blew up on Twitter as soon as they released this ruling update regarding the Iron Solari League, which is a female-only tournament that they run. This one is running in the Philippines. And what they did was they updated their rules to include lesbian, gay, and transgendered women. They, I guess, decided that let's read the first section here. This coming leg, we intend to experiment on some changes we plan to put in place with regards to who can join the Iron Solari. This is related to open discussion whether members of the lesbian, gay, and transgendered women, particularly gay and transgendered women, be allowed to participate. We've given a lot of thought on the subject, and we've similarly consulted and talked with the various parties, including the female teams who joined the first leg of the Iron Solari, and a number of LoL players belonging to the lesbian, gay, and transgendered women community. So the problem here is they've kind of set this weird and very strange set of rules, and they talk about how lesbian, gay, and transgendered women have some unfair advantage, and that might be unfair to the other players in the division. That they put a limit to you can have a maximum of one gay and transgendered woman on your team. It's just a lot of very strange rules. It's first I want to say that this is obviously a translation, so there could be something lost in translation. I always want to give the benefit of the doubt on things like that.
I'm not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. It's stupid as hell, is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the ruling as it's written here is stupid as hell, but there could be something that we don't understand about how it was translated, words getting mixed up. The verbiage here and the grammar and some of that isn't great in this written statement. So maybe something I always want to give the benefit of the doubt with those things, because you really never know when you're reading another translation. There's so many things that get lost in translation. So first I want to put that out there. But yes, as you said, the ruling as it is here is absolutely dumb. Completely dumb. There's so many different things to talk about, I think, with this ruling. I guess let's start out with the idea that this is an all-female tournament, which I think is a very cool idea. I think that's a great way to get women gamers involved, get them involved in the pro scene, get players watching these women compete at the highest levels. So it kind of puts off that women can't play at the high levels.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, for people who don't know much about the esports scene, essentially there's two kinds of token, because you don't have you need to be clear that you don't have men only tournaments.
Right. You
have open tournaments.
Yep.
And you have female only tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only two kinds of tournaments you have. So anyone could compete in the open tournaments, male or female. It's predominantly male gamers. Now the reason for this is that this isn't a sexist thing or anything like that, is that the reality of the esports scene at the moment is that at the very highest top level, it is male gamers.
Yep.
That is just the reality of it.
Yep.
And there is a significantly disproportionate number of gamers, in terms of the ratio between male pro gamers and female pro gamers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is due to a lot of reasons. And particularly League of Legends. League of Legends actually has I think it has the highest female fan base of any other MOBA.
Right.
With something, I think it was something like Riot said something like 15 to 20%.
I think it's 20% is the number I've seen.
Which of a game that has millions and millions of players, that's a hell of a lot of women for an online
and a community
game.
that is stereotypically so poor with all the harassment that goes on in the game. That's a League is a game that has a reputation for being not player friendly in their community.
I think it's fair to say that all not just MOBAs but online games do. I don't think it's not something that's unique to League of Legends. It is the culture of online games, and that it is. I mean, the reality of gaming culture as it is, I guess. I'm not sure if I subscribe to that there is such a thing as gaming culture, but the reality is of playing online games is that if you are a female and you are going to play an online game, you are more likely to be on the receiving end of harassment than you are if you're a male. And that is just, I mean, I'm not saying that males don't get harassed, because they do. And
anyone who says otherwise is...
people are horrible to people in general. That's just the way of the world. But if you are a female, you are definitely more likely to be on the receiving end of harassment, particularly harassment that a male wouldn't receive because of your gender. And that is just the simple fact of it.
Definitely. So, yeah, the female tournaments give them an arena that is just theirs, and hopefully leads to something where they don't need the women-only tournaments. I feel like that's the point of women-only tournaments, is that someday we won't need them, but for now we do, and hopefully that will lead to the bigger opens where more women are competing at the highest levels.
Yeah, so. I mean, female-only tournaments, they have a conflict. For me, personally, is that on one hand, it can be perceived that by having a female-only tournament, you're saying that the female gamers can't compete with the male gamers because you have to have a female-only tournament.
Right.
So that you're possibly intrinsically saying that female gamers aren't as good as the male gamers.
Yep.
However, I don't personally, while that perception can be had, I don't think that is the case. I think the simple fact is that in the context of, because you have to put everything in context. This isn't just a League of Legends, this one-time thing. This is a cultural problem. This isn't a gaming problem. This is a societal problem that, women don't feel comfortable pursuing a career in gaming.
Yep.
And, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I'm a bit of a history nerd and a sociological nerd, and I like to, if you look at any point in history, society is always trying to tell women what to do. That's the simple fact of it. In the 50s, in the 40s, in the 60s, it was all, in the 50s particularly, it was when you finish school, you should go get married and have kids.
Right.
That was what society told women to do. And then you remember there was a resurgence of feminism in the late 90s and the early 2000s that basically said, and again, the problem with some society is that it was telling women that you're bad if you're a stay-at-home mum.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't do that. You should be going out there and being a CEO and doing something important for all women.
Right. Yep.
And again, but that's not saying do what you want. That's telling you to go do something specific. The point of, I think, of real feminism is to do what you want.
Yeah.
If you want to be a stay-at-home mum, go be a stay-at-home mum. That's feminism. You're doing what you want to do. Right. If you want to go be a CEO and you can do that, go do that. It doesn't matter. Do what you want to do.
Right. Yep.
And the problem is, particularly in the pro gamer scene, is that even for males, it is particularly hard to do that as a career.
Right. Because
there is a lot of stigma about being a pro gamer, and particularly, especially when you've got to understand that the context of the pro gamer scene is that the majority of pro gamers for any game at the moment come from Southeast Asia.
Right.
They come from places like Korea and China.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so and the males struggle to become pro gamers in those countries because in that society you're told to go finish university, get a job. That's it as a male. Yep. So imagine the difficulty of a female trying to get in the pro gamer scene in those countries.
Right.
My problem with this specific tournament and this specific rule is that this has it has prejudice written all over it.
Yeah.
And it's the prejudice, I think, of ignorance, and I'm not sure what they're thinking, like what is in their mind.
Right.
Because what you've essentially said is you can have one gay transgendered woman on your team.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is, particularly with the transgendered issue, what you're saying is that my question to them would be, are you saying that a transgendered woman has an advantage over other female players?
I mean, that's what it's written to say. It says that they have some kind of advantage.
Do you know what I mean? And are they then saying that because this transforms, because that also means that because that transgendered woman was at one time perceived as a man, do you then say that male gamers are better than female gamers? And then are you saying that the male gamers are better than female gamers because of biological reasons, which there is no proof of? There is no proof of that. In a physical sport like, I don't know, your American basketball, right? There is a legitimate concern that males will, if you played a male NBA team against a women's, what's the women's league? WNBA? Simple. I know, I'm not American. There is physical, biological reasons why that male team would probably win that female team, because men have a different biological structure and they're more muscly. Not in all cases, but in the general sense. For video games, that isn't the case. So it doesn't matter, what genitals you have. Why does it matter? And then you've also got the thing of who makes that call.
Right.
Who makes that call? What kind of judge, an esports judge might I add, makes the call on if you're a male or you're a female?
Right.
You can't do that. It's like, that's ridiculous.
It's super crazy. Like, when this story came out, it was super crazy to read it, which is why the first thing I went to was the Lost in Translation, because the way they say that they've spoken to people of the lesbian, gay, and transgendered community, that seems impossible for what is written here. And this is where I feel like these groups do need more diversity in them, and this is where diversity is really important, is for rulings like that. You need the opinions of other people. I can't believe that they spoke to anyone of the lesbian, gay, and transgendered community, and they read this ruling and were like, yeah, that's cool. That's exactly what we want to say.
To me, you don't need a ruling. It's that simple. You should be all inclusive. You shouldn't need a ruling. It doesn't matter if the woman is gay, transgendered, anything. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't. It really. But it just doesn't matter in the sense that it doesn't matter that they're a transgendered woman or whatever. But it just doesn't matter in terms of the game. It doesn't matter in terms of the actual competitive gameplay.
Right.
What are they afraid of? I mean, are they afraid of that the male gamers will put on a wig and pretend to be transgendered so they can win a female-only tournament? Right. Is that what they're afraid of? I mean,
I think that's actually the situation that they're trying to avoid.
Because that's ridiculous.
That is ridiculous, but I don't fault them for trying to have a ruling on this. And when I first read about this, I thought that this was a good thing. I didn't read the actual ruling. I just saw people talking about a LoL tournament allowing gay and transgendered people in the tournament, and I thought that was great. I think it's great to give more diverse groups of people the ability to compete in these tournaments. We talked about how the female only tournaments are a good thing for a community that isn't necessarily represented in the higher open series, but I think that this is a good starting point, at least. It's a terrible implementation, but a good starting point.
I don't know. I think the conversation this puts more people off than it brings in. I think that this says this is bad. I don't think
Yes,
this is
no,
good at all.
this is bad as it is right now, but I think the idea and what they were trying to accomplish, I think in some strange way is good. I think they were thinking, hey, we want to get this group of people more involved, so what can we do to get them involved? Now, what they ended up was nowhere near what they should have in any possible respect. Any sane human being would be able to tell you that, oh, looks like I lost him here, but let me try and recall him. But anyway, I'll finish my point since I think you guys can still hear me. I think any sane person would be able to tell you that this is by no means a good implementation of what they were trying to do. And I think that happens a lot where people think they have the right idea. They think, okay, this is what we're going to do to try and help these people without necessarily realizing how you're going to help them. Yes, we should just finish up by saying they issued another statement in a follow-up after the whole media firestorm happened, saying that their initial ruling was, obviously not the best. They really wanted to promote diversity in competitive gaming, and they're grateful for their players, and they're going to try and, come up with a better system. It sounds like they're going to allow everyone to compete in all the female tournaments, so that's a good resolution, I think.
Yeah, I think the thing is what they should have just come out and said in the first place is gay, transgendered, bisexual, whatever, are all welcome. That's what you should do in the first place.
That would have avoided a lot of this.
Because at the end of the day, it's in my head, if they're genuinely thinking that you're going to get a competitive male pro gamer coming in a wig and dressing like white chicks to win a female-only tournament,
yep.
That is worth the risk of someone doing that,
right?
To be inclusive. Because at the end of the day, my opinion is of female-only tournaments is that it's an environment where female gamers can build up the confidence. Because at the end of the day, I know from talking to women that it is a scary thing. Because no matter where you go to play online games, you get harassed. So it's for women, it's constantly on their mind. So I imagine that a female-only tournament is a place where they can go and feel secure because they're surrounded by other women and other women who do the same thing, so that they can build up the confidence to enter the open tournaments. Right. And I think that it's worth the risk of someone trying to cheat the system,
right, to
be inclusive. Because at the end of the day, you're always going to get shitty people who cheat systems. That's right. The nature of everything.
Definitely.
But it's not because when you put restrictions on things like that, it sends out the wrong messages completely. And right. I think that whether or not they had good intentions of trying to be inclusive or not, as soon as you set limitations like that, it's prejudicial, and you shouldn't do that. That's like going back, to years and years. What are you going to do? So tell transgendered people to go sit at the back of the bus?
Right.
Really?
Right. And I think also that they should look at what the purpose of the tournament is for. The purpose of the tournament is to get people that don't have anywhere else to go, really, a place to play. And these people clearly don't really have another great place to go. They either compete at the top level or they don't compete at all. And I think that giving another place for... It's really... I feel like they should almost rename the tournament from just like a women's only tournament to something else in order to remove the stigma that this is only for women. Because I could see a world where they talked to some of the players and they said, hey, this is a women's only tournament, why isn't there a transgendered only tournament or something like that? And that's something that I feel, it's tough to comment on. Is that really how it should be done? I don't know. It's a tough situation, but I feel like this is the worst possible way to do it, and I feel like they should just allow everyone in.
Yeah, they should just allow anyone in, and I'm quite happy for them to say if you are a male gamer and you identify as male, then you shouldn't be allowed to play in the female-only tournament.
Right.
And the only specific reason is for that is, like I say, the reality of esports is that male gamers dominate at a very much higher level than females currently. Now, there will come a time when female-only tournaments produce, encourage more and more female gamers to come into the esports scene. And then there will come a time when at the open tournaments, you will have a good ratio of male and female at the highest level, right, at the very highest level.
Right.
But at the same time, gaming, especially esports in particular, is, at its core, is about the best player plays.
Right.
And at the moment, the reality of esports is that it is a very much male-dominated scene. Now, female-only tournaments can only go forth and promote females coming in and getting better at the games, and then then building up the confidence enough to enter the open tournaments. Lots of editing.
That makes it fun, though. I mean, what? No, it doesn't. It makes it so unfun. Kind of forget what we were talking about, but like where we were in the conversation. But I think we've kind of covered that pretty well. I feel like the technical difficulties were telling us to move on. So, I think we've made our point. It's a pretty dumb situation, but hopefully it gets better. Anyway, game of the week. Let's move on to something really exciting, and that is this week's game of the week. Darkest Dungeon is now available on early access on Steam. It is a roguelike turn-based RPG developed and published by Red Hook Studios, Inc. It is available for $20 or $19.99 or your regional equivalent, I guess. And you can check out the website and you can check out the link to purchase it on Steam in the show notes. This game is awesome. I love this game. And it's only in early access, so it can only improve. I think that it's a really well thought out game. I think it fills a niche that we don't really have. There's a ton of roguelikes out there, but not really in this style, which I really appreciate. And I can't say enough good things about this game. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Darkest Dungeon's been on my radar for quite a while, ever since it was kickstarted, because I saw the art style and the concept that they were going for, and I really like it. I mean, it's one of those games that's it ticks all the boxes for me, for what I like in games personally, like the genre. Like I like RPGs, I like roguelikes. The art style is just phenomenal, and it's it's a 2D game that they do it in a way that's really fun, because the art style is really vivid and vibrant, and then it's got you visually. And then I like the way that even for a 2D, because you play the game, it's a side scroller essentially, and you play the game, and even in battle they pan the camera to kind of tilt it depending on whose turn it is. And I really like that they didn't keep a static camera, that they tried to move it a bit and make it look a bit more cinematic. And I love. It's one of those games that, even though it's on early access, it is a game that I cannot recommend enough to people. It is one of those games that it's a stable build on early access. It's they expect to spend about 6 months in early access, because there's still more content to come. But even if this released now, the amount of content in there is worth the money.
Definitely. I think this game puts other games to shame that go under early access. It has a ton of content, and there's only more to come, which is exciting to think about. Now, obviously, it is still early access, so you can't 100% say this game is going to be amazing, because they could totally F something up in the time from now to then. But as this game is now, and where I think they're going with it, this game is going to be great, and this game is great right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case of, I think that, because I do a show on my YouTube channel called Early Access Examination, where I take a look at early access games, at what they basically have implemented at the moment, what they've got to come, and I talk about potential. And I think Darkest Dungeon is the only game that I've ever said that I'm not going to talk about potential, because the potential of the game's already been reached, in my opinion. I think that it can all that they need to do is just add the content that they want to add in terms of more dungeons and more locations, and then polish it up, because it's just so complete already in terms of the core mechanics of the game. I mean, there's nothing in there that doesn't work. That all the core mechanics are in the game. There's no features particularly missing.
Right, and I wrote down a couple things that I want, but they're all peripheral things, small little tweaks that could be added, and that's something that could easily be put in the next 6 months until they go live. Let's talk a little bit about the core mechanics of the game. So basically, it's a party-based, turn-based RPG with some side-scroller elements, some roguelike elements. There's permadeath, so if your character dies when they're going into the dungeon, that character is gone for good. You can't get him back. There's no resurrection stone or anything that I've seen thus far. Maybe they will add one at some point, but I hope they don't. So. Yeah, it doesn't seem like they will. And it's just a real fun game. You recruit people in your town, so you start in a town, and there's some upgrade shops, and there's a blacksmith, and there's all different things to do while you're in the town. You pick your team of 4 to go into the dungeon. You do a dungeon crawl, you come out, and you start the cycle all over again. It's a little bit like Rogue Legacy in that respect, where you have a town where you do all your upgrades and stuff, and then you have your castle that you're sieging to actually play the game. And one of the key components of this is that characters, in addition to having health, they also have a stress meter. And this is the key to this game. The fact that characters that you play with will build up stress as you go along. So maybe they get hit with a crit and a bleed. They take some stress damage as well, and some actual damage. And the stress damage is much harder to get rid of than the actual health damage. Healing is pretty easy, but healing stress is a lot more difficult. And if characters reach a max stress level, there's a chance that they do all sorts of crazy things, from hurting themselves to getting the other character's stress levels up, to refusing to take heals, which is probably the most dangerous of all of them. Characters will say, no, don't heal me, or no, only heal me. They'll do whatever they want. Stress is really the core mechanic to this game. And I think they've done a great job making dungeon crawling not only, a paint-by-numbers situation, but also an exercise in managing your character's stress.
Yeah, so the stress mechanic I really like, because essentially it's called the affliction system, whereby, once your character reaches a certain stress point, you basically get afflicted by something like fearful, which means that your character becomes, overrun with fear, and the character kind of ends up like, you can skip turns, or like you say, you can skip heals, something like that. What I do like, though, is that some characters can become virtuous, and that it's pretty rare, but like it can end up saving your entire party. For example, I had a really bad dungeon run where all my characters were just about to hit max stress level, and mainly because one of my characters, I think it was my plague doctor, got paranoia. And what paranoia does, he basically ends up saying stuff like, if you get injured, one of your other party members get injured, he'll end up saying like, did you let them hit you on purpose? Are you working for them? Mm-hmm. And which affects the stress level of everyone else. So my stress levels of all my entire party went up really, really quickly. And then basically everyone got afflicted, apart from my crusader, who became virtuous. And what virtuous does, it's the opposite of affliction. So he'll become like courageous or something like that, yep, where his stress level will reduce by half. And then he will gain buffs instead of debuffs. So he will, become stronger, etc., etc. And I really like that. It's one of those moments in the game where if one of your characters becomes virtuous, you feel so much, just the relief.
And like every
fantastic.
Time someone goes to like a full stress bar, you're thinking, oh, if he becomes virtuous, this is going to be awesome. And then it never happens. And you're like, oh, now I'm screwed.
Yeah, but I mean, essentially the game is about that. I mean, the game is about the mental,
definitely,
the psychological effects of adventuring and going into dungeons and facing skeleton warriors and horrible creatures. Yep. And I like that. I mean, the premise of the game is, in terms of story, is that your relative was basically super rich, owned an estate and some lands, and he lived a life of basically, he drank what he wanted, ate what he wanted, and he was rich. and he essentially got bored, and he found that there was secrets in the estate, and that he basically used magic and stuff to unlock a portal in the darkest dungeon.
Because, of course, that's what you do when you're bored.
Because, well, naturally,
Summon demons, why not?
You got everything, just, open a portal.
Yeah. Bill Gates is doing that right now at his house. That's what he's doing.
So, that basically happens, and then he shoots himself because, as you do.
Rich people problems, man. Rich people problems.
Yeah. And then, so you basically inherit, you're an inheritor to the estate, and essentially, you're not one of the characters on the screen. You basically hire adventurers. So that's the mechanic of the game. Now, with the stress mechanic in particular, basically in the hamlet, you have an abbey and a tavern and a sanatorium. And basically, what the abbey and the sanatorium basically, the abbey and the tavern basically are places where you can place your characters for money, and you reduce their stress levels. Because characters after a dungeon always continually have their stress levels at what they ended the dungeon with.
That's an important part.
So it's about management, and it's about stress management. So it's important to, if you've got a team member, say your Crusader, who's a frontline melee character, and he's at 75% stress, then you need to put him into the tavern or the abbey so he can relax before the next dungeon. And maybe not take him on the next dungeon, take someone else. So, his stress level, because ultimately going into a dungeon with your characters that are already high stress will, ruin your dungeon for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most important parts of the game, and one of the key elements to the game is the fact that most games like this, you just pick your core team, and that's your team that you run with the entire time. But the stress mechanic makes it so that you come out of a dungeon with your core team, and they can't go right back into a dungeon usually. They have to get their stress levels down.
Yeah.
And maybe you haven't gotten enough money in order to get all of their stress levels down. So one of them has to wait until the next time you get money, and you'll get that person's stress level down. So it really forces you to mix up your team, mix and match different characters.
Yeah.
Where other JRPGs is just like, pick the 4 you like, and you'll run with them the entire game, and that's your team. That's how you go through the game.
Particularly for me, I like mechanics, and particularly in RPGs and turn-based games, I like good combat mechanics that require good strategy and good tactics. And one thing I really liked about Darkest Dungeon's combat system was the idea of positioning, because positioning is basically integral into everything that you do in combat. Characters will have abilities that require a certain position to be, because you essentially got it's viewed from the side, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and essentially some characters, for example, the Plague Doctor, who has ranged abilities and buff and debuff abilities, he can only use his abilities being at the back of the group, whereas a melee character will only be able to use their abilities at the front of the group. Mm-hmm. So when you look at characters, they all have preferred positions, and each ability has a preferred position, and to target as well, that has positions that you can only target. So it's important to make sure that you've got all your characters in their preferred positions, because ultimately taking, if you can't take 4 melee characters, it wouldn't work, because the 2 at the back just won't have anything to do and become useless.
Right. It also adds a really cool element where you have your standard, damage abilities, your debuffs, your bleeds, your poison effects, things like that. But it also adds the positional element to the game, where certain abilities will push characters or pull characters up to the front. And then once that character is in the front, they can't use any of their abilities. If your healer gets pulled to the front line, not only can he be hit by melee characters now, he can't heal. His heal abilities must be used in the back row. So you have to move him back there, and that takes turns in order to do.
Yeah, that is something that really added a good tactical element to the game, and it made you, it makes you in mid-battle, readjust your strategy. Because you can move characters, you can use their turn to move. But also one really good thing is that a lot of abilities have positional elements. So, for example, the Jester, which was a character I really loved, has abilities that basically, if you put him in maybe like third or second position from the front, he has an ability that, say, your healer gets dragged to the front from the very back, and what he actually can do is do a melee attack from second or third position that will not only attack the front target of the enemy team, but he will move to the front.
Yep.
So there's that kind of tactical element that I really enjoy.
I had a marksman character who had, if he got pulled to the front, he could do like this close shot ability, and it knocks him back to the back row.
Yeah, the point blank.
Yeah, the
shot.
point blank shot. So
that was really good.
There's a lot of moving parts to the combat system, which is really cool. There hasn't really been a JRPG in a while that has had this kind of new mechanic, something completely different from other systems. So I really appreciate that. I think
because I think it's a case of, when you look at the game on a trailer or something like that, it seems kind of simplistic, but there's actually quite a lot of depth to the battles and the combat. And going back to the hamlet, you also have like a blacksmith and a guild, where the guild basically allows you to train and improve characters' abilities. And the blacksmith allows you to improve your weapons and armor. And all this requires, each town facility requires you to upgrade it with heirlooms that you earn from going into dungeons and looting and stuff.
Yep.
So it's got really good elements of kind of different genres pulled in.
Yep.
But it's done in a way that it's not disjointed. It's all very tight and executed very well. So you've got management, you've got, turn-based tactical combat, you've got RPG elements. And I really think that the whole thing was just produced in a fantastic way. I mean, it's one of those games that I sat there when I first played it, because I was excited of it coming out, not to the point of like I thought it was going to be good, but just to the point I was interested to see what it was going to be like. And then I sat and played it, and then I played it for like 8 hours straight. I mean, it was just, it's that good. It's, in dungeons you have a light mechanic. Light is also very important, so that you need to take torches and food and all kinds of provisions with you, because characters need to eat while they're in dungeons, or they'll gain stress and they'll starve and lose health. They need torches to be able to see, because the darker that it gets in the dungeon, essentially the harder combat becomes. And you also have things like, in dungeons you have traps, you have looting, and looting isn't straightforward as people think. Like you can't just go and loot stuff and expect to get treasure all the time.
Yep.
For example, if you see a pile of books and you loot that pile of books, you may read something that gives you a buff, or you may read an unsettling passage that gives you stress damage. Like, it could go either way.
Yeah.
It's the same with chests. You could get treasure, or it could be trapped. It's one of those things that you just don't know.
Right. There's so many different mechanics in there. We haven't even talked about the excuse me. Oh man, I'm gonna take a drink right now. Holy Jesus!
But I mean, I think that there's so many good things about the game. I mean, particularly the dungeons. The dungeons are done in a way that basically you have different types of, you have different locations for dungeons, which will have different enemies, but you have also different lengths, because essentially the way the dungeons work is you go from room to room via a hallway, and then the room will have either nothing in, or it'll have a battle in, or it'll have a treasure in.
Yep.
And the hallways are filled with battles and looting objects. But essentially it's different lengths. So you have short dungeons where you can just go in, do it in a reasonable length of time. You have medium or long dungeons, which will require you to camp. And it will give you the resources to camp, and basically camping partway through a dungeon. Essentially what that does, it's almost like a quick fix, so that each of your characters will have camping abilities, so that they can reduce stress and heal each other while in camp. But also in camp, you can be, once you've finished camping, you can be attacked with a surprise attack, which can lead to death, essentially.
Yeah. And what I was going to say before I was attacked by some kind of frog, was the fact, oh man, it's still happening. I don't know what's going on with me. But the fact that death isn't just death. When a character goes to 0 health, they don't die. They go into a state where they can take a death blow. Any damage after a character reaches 0 has a chance to kill them, but they have a chance to forward on and continue fighting. So I think that's a cool mechanic in that it adds additional, where they could have just made it so a character goes to 0 and dies. But I think making it a random chance adds even more to the sense of just chance and stress. I think it's really stressful when a character is at death blow and you see they're getting attacked and like, oh, don't die.
Yeah.
And it could, in other games, have a feeling where this is like BS. It's just, I lost to a dice roll. This is stupid. I don't like this. But it doesn't feel that way in this game. And I feel that way about a lot of parts of this game, where a lot of it in other games would feel like I'm just losing to dice rolls. This is stupid. I don't like this game. I just lost my team because of dice rolls. But in this game, it feels like it all is so coherent and fits together so nicely that I think they've done a great job making it stressful, but also fair, which is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of with any game that has dice rolls behind the mechanics and hit chances and crit chances and stuff like that. You're always going to get a period of unfairness, or at least where it feels unfair because of you didn't get the rolls you wanted, etc., which is intrinsic to almost the genre, and it's kind of one of the reasons I like it, because I like the chance that I could fail. I like I don't want to be going through a game and just winning everything all the time. It's a bit boring.
Right.
But the difference is it doesn't feel unfair. Like
Exactly.
it's essentially, while there are really punishing bits in there, and you can have just a really bad dungeon run and you think, where did this come from, and like you end up losing 2 of your best characters. You still want to continue on. It doesn't make you lose the plot and quit the game. I mean, I just played a game called Blackguards 2, where again it's similar tactical turn-based combat, but that game, the rule system behind that game just makes it so annoying.
Right.
Just so annoying, because it doesn't matter how good you are in that game of positioning your characters and the strategy that you use, those dice rolls just ain't coming your way.
Right.
Whereas in Darkest Dungeon, there is a good amount of skill involved in using your tactics and coming up with the best strategies to take down an enemy.
Right.
And I think that while you can have bad rolls and you can have critical hits that just ruin your day, you also have the good element of what you do and the choices you make do affect the outcome. And
it changes the way you play the game too. Like the first time I went through the first dungeon, I was like, oh look, loot, I'm gonna pick up this loot, and it was trapped. Oh cool, there's a weapon lying here, I'm just gonna go pick it up. Oh damn, I'm bleeding now. It forces you to understand that there is a chance that this goes horribly wrong right now. It sets you up for that expectation. And that's an important part of how this game seems so fair, is that if you do something, there is a chance something bad happens. So maybe you should do something differently. You should play in a certain way that avoids that if you don't want to deal with how this happens or how something else happens.
Yeah, I mean, and the characters that are available to you, there's a good variety of classes and stuff like that. I mean, I personally really like the Jester, the Crusader. Particularly, I like the Leper. I thought the Leper was really,
cool.
really good.
Leper is cool.
Because the Leper is such a Kingdom of Heaven reference. If anyone's ever seen that film with Orlando Bloom in.
Yeah, I have not.
It's basically the Leper is dressed like, because essentially he's dressed as the King of Jerusalem from Kingdom of Heaven, who was a leper, and he was the Leper King Baldwin. And I actually sent a tweet to the developers saying I really enjoyed the Kingdom of Heaven reference, and they were like, yep. And I was like, good on you. That film is not referenced enough. That is a great film.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that particular reference.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I really like almost all the characters. They all have a certain niche that they fit. Some are debuff classes. You need a good mixture. The only thing that I found that was a little annoying is the fact that the emphasis on a healer is so great. Like, if you do not have a healer in your party, you are going to fail. There is no way really to get through a dungeon without a healer. I feel like that's something that could be worked on in some way.
I think maybe that is true. I mean, I think the shorter dungeons don't necessarily require. I mean, I've done a few dungeons without a healer at all. but again, it's a thing. I don't mind that too much because I think that realistically, you probably would need a healer. I mean,
that is true.
But at the same time, one thing I don't think that it's that bad is because the healers intrinsically in the game, the way that they've built the character classes, they fulfill two roles rather than just a healer role. Mm-hmm. Particularly things like the occultist and the vestal. Usually, the vestal has healing abilities, like she has a party heal or she has a specific heal for one character, which is more powerful. But she also has abilities that do damage to undead. She has abilities that affect. Not only do damage but can affect the light as well. So she has an illumination ability which will do damage to a character and then also increase the light by a percentage. The same with the occultist. The occultist has a healing ability, and his healing ability not only heals a character but it can actually cause bleed.
Right. I think that's really cool.
And all of his other abilities are to do with buffs and debuffs and that kind of thing. So I think that it's not a case of the healers just being a healer. I mean, many of the characters fulfill more than one role.
Right.
Even the melee characters, while they are melee characters, fulfill more than one role. For example, like the highwayman, he has both melee abilities and ranged abilities. Even the crusader, who is a primarily melee character, has abilities that can heal, can reinforce defense, or even a ranged ability that can attack multiple characters. So I think that it's designed in a way that it doesn't feel like you're having the traditional trope of healer, DPS, tank.
And all the classes do have I think it's 8 or 10 different abilities that you can choose from. So you do get some level of customization. Like if you want a second slot crusader, you could probably do it and really tailor.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's many times in dungeons I've went in with like 2 highwaymen, 2 crusaders, 2 lepers, because they fulfill more than one role.
Yeah.
So it works really good like that, and I think that's required because every time if you go to hire new adventurers, it's a random chance of who you're going to get.
Right.
So it was designed that way, and I like that. I mean, one thing we haven't touched on is traits.
Right.
That characters kind of have traits that can have positive or negative effects.
And they're randomized from an enormous pool, from hemophilia to...
They're randomized, but they also... they're randomized in terms of start. So when you start, they're randomized, but they're not randomized when you get them in dungeons and stuff. For example, I had one character who was a vestal, and basically a vestal's damage thing, she does really good against kind of unholy creatures like skeletons and stuff, like undead creatures. And she actually got critical. She got a critical from a skeleton warrior, and which caused her to become afflicted because her stress level was really high. Mm-hmm. And then once the dungeon had finished, she actually got a phobia of unholy creatures, which completely debuffed her effectiveness against creatures. So what happens in dungeons affects characters in very meaningful ways, which I really like. But traits can also be removed from the sanatorium in the hamlet for money. But it is expensive to do that. So it's often best to, if there's just little traits that don't really matter that much, leave them. Mm-hmm. But, characters can get...
And you could also get rid of them through other means, too. Like, if you send a character to go pray, it's possible for them to lose one of their afflictions. Or if they go drinking out in a night, they can lose an affliction. But they can also gain afflictions from these things, too. You can end up throwing them into the gambling hall, and they get addicted to gambling. It happens.
Yeah.
It's really
I really
neat
like
how
that.
It's super neat. I think they've done a great job interweaving so many systems. Like, the game has tons and tons of systems, and maybe that can be a detriment sometimes. Sometimes it does feel a little overwhelming how many different things you need to manage. And sometimes sometimes I get the feeling that you're just spinning your tires because you come out of a dungeon, okay, these people need to get their stress down, I'll run in with another group. Okay, well, I wasn't able to afford all the people's stress down, so I'm just kind of like doing the same small dungeons over and over again just to get myself started. Maybe they could help get you started a little bit more quickly, maybe with a couple leveled characters or something. I don't know, but
no, I mean, I like going from the bottom up like that. But that's my love of RPGs
Right.
and my love of the genre is that I like starting from nothing, and then when I get to the certain point, I'll be able to sit there and say, well, I started with nothing. And, especially in a roguelike where you have, say you start with a Crusader, having that Crusader stay alive the entire way through, that's an achievement.
Definitely.
That's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
And
I just feel like
that.
the opening of the game has a little bit more grind, I feel like, than I would prefer, just to get your...
Maybe, I could definitely see that. But I don't mind it because it's that fun.
Right.
Like, it's not like an MMO grind.
Yes, I'm making a very small complaint about the game that I loved. I loved playing the game, and I did like starting from nothing.
Yeah.
But I
know people did complain about not having enough short dungeons to do at the start.
Yeah, that
because
might help.
it kind of when you have short dungeons, and I think it's because, and I'm not sure about this, and I could be wrong, but it depends what missions you have available to you in terms of length and difficulty depend on the character levels of your roster.
Oh.
Because the reason I say this is that once I had characters that basically leveled up to resolve level 1, and then I brought in, and basically the only missions I had available was basically level 1 up, but it was all medium.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had like a section of short dungeons that were all level 3, and then I brought in some new characters that were all resolve level 0, and then suddenly after I'd done a dungeon, because I still had some resolve level 0 characters on,
right,
I got more short dungeons that were all level 1.
Yeah.
So I think it could be reflective of what kind of characters.
Maybe they don't want you like grinding the level 1 dungeons with your higher level characters super easy or something. I could see that.
So
but, maybe more variety, I think, would definitely help, and that's something that we could definitely see going forward. They said they're working on more levels and dungeons to get in the game. So
and different quests, because dungeons do have different goals.
Right.
There are some that are easier than others. Like, for example, you may have something that you just have to go, cleanse 3 altars, which doesn't require you to go through all the rooms if you have a run of good luck and find them all relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. But then you have also quests that will require you to explore 90% of the dungeon rooms, which, the longer you stay in a dungeon, more chance of things going wrong.
Yeah. And I had some smaller, very small things that I would prefer to get in there. I feel like there's a distinct lack of a combat log or something telling you what's going on above just, damage numbers and attack abilities. It would be nice to see why certain abilities missed or why certain abilities hit. Like, what is the math that goes into those dice rolls? I'm a big combat log person. I like seeing all the combat written out. So I would hope they add something like that in there, and also just some explanation of how turn order works. I don't think that's ever explained in the game itself.
Yeah, I mean, the way I figured it out, the only reason I figured it out is because I play a lot of RPGs. It's affected by a couple of things. It's essentially like an initiative turn in other games.
Right.
But I think it's essentially based off your character's speed.
Yeah, I saw the speed stat, but there's no description of what that stat does in the game.
I think that's the way that the turn order is made. It's based off a character's speed, but there is also other elements.
Right.
So, for example, if your team's surprised or the enemy team's surprised. So if you engage in combat and the enemy team are surprised, all your characters will go first.
Right.
So it works like that. As far as I can tell.
Right. And I think there are other modifiers in there too, because I have had turns start and certain characters that have never started first in a turn, all of a sudden they get to
I think there are
first.
definitely other modifiers, but as I say, I think like as a general principle, I think that at its core, it's based off a character's speed.
Right.
Similar to, other games having characters have initiative, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and overall, I think they do a pretty good job of spreading out all the different systems of the game so that you're not crazy overwhelmed right off the start. A lot of the buildings you can't go into in the town when you just first start out, and they slowly open them up. But once you do get everything piled on top of you, it is like, oh my god, there's so much to do.
It's a case of knowing your management games really well.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be upgrading a building that you don't need.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because for me at the start, people always go for the blacksmith and the guild, to improve characters' weapons and armor and stuff. You shouldn't.
Yeah, no.
What you actually should do is upgrade the tavern and the abbey first, because then you can put in more characters at once, and it reduces the cost of using those facilities, because you're going to be using them every single turn, like every single turn. So it's best to get those down first, and then once your characters have kind of leveled up to maybe resolve level 1, resolve level 2, then go into the blacksmith and improve their weapons and armor. That's the way to do it. But the boss battles...
Oh my god! I've just hit my first boss battle the other day, and
which one was it? Which one did you go for?
The big fat pig dude with the cleaver and like the little pig.
I can't remember. I don't think I've done that.
Oh my god! I got in there and I was like, okay, there's a really big guy and there's a little guy behind him. So clearly, I'm supposed to attack the little guy. So I attacked the little guy, and it was like the big guy enrages and he does a cleave attack that hits the entire team for 10, and then he does that every turn until everyone's dead.
Yeah, there's a boss battle called the wizened hag, or the withered hag, I think it is, or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh my god, she was a pain. Like, basically,
and that's
her
awesome.
thing is,
that's great.
in front of her is a pot, is a big cauldron, and basically what she does is every turn, she will take one of your party and put them in the pot. And essentially, the longer that they're in the pot, they take more damage, and then as soon as they're at death's door, they'll come out of the pot. So to get them out of the pot, you have to do damage to the pot, and then it'll spill out. But it does require a lot of damage to get them out of there. And at the same time, like, you've only got... So basically, one of your characters is completely out. So you're basically playing with 3 characters.
Right, yeah.
And it's hard to do enough damage to the pot, never mind to do damage to both her and the pot.
Right.
And then... once someone's in the pot, she'll still have another turn, so she'll do like an AoE attack or something like that. So essentially, I spent the entire literally the entire battle with all of my characters at death's door. Yeah, all of them.
That's crazy, but that makes for an amazing story. That's like the thing you remember about a game is times like that. The times when you were like, I am straight on death's door. There is like a razor's edge between winning and losing. Yeah. That's what makes games amazing, those moments. But
I like that the boss battles kind of tend to introduce new mechanics into the combat and stuff like that. I like that. That's really good. So, but yeah, overall...
I mean, that Darkest Dungeon is awesome. I think we both would recommend this game. I guess the one question I ask every week is, if this was the one game you were playing this week, would you have been happy?
Oh yes.
Yeah, I totally agree too. Check this game out right now.
I mean, it is one of the literally only times, like I said in my my video on my channel.
Right.
It is one of possibly the only times that you will ever hear me say, "Go out and buy an early access game."
Right. Yeah, there are certain pillars of early access. You know, the Kerbal Space programs, the Prison Architects, that I think everyone holds in very high esteem, and I think this game is just as good and well polished as those.
Yeah,
games.
I mean, I think the quality of the game is just. Whether you enjoy the mechanics or not, like, the quality of the game is undeniable.
Definitely,
like,
absolutely.
That's just the way it is. I mean,
it's very different from any other game you're going to buy on Steam as well, which is also important. I can't think of another turn-based RPG with management elements with a roguelike and.
I mean, there's definitely similar games, but there's nothing that's the same. Right. Like because I mean, it has the unique stress mechanics and stuff like that.
Yes.
But I mean, like I said, I put out 2 videos on my channel this week. One was the early access examination for H1Z1, and the other was for Darkest Dungeon. And put it this way, the H1Z1, I was like, do not get this game. Right. If you want to play it, wait till it comes out and free to play, but don't get it. And then the other was Darkest Dungeon, where I was telling people, go and buy this game. Yeah,
and which one of the games was made by a multi-million-dollar corporation? Which one is made by a small indie studio?
Couldn't say.
It's really crazy. So many good indies are coming out right now. I think this is a great time for video games, especially these
indies steal the scene every time, because it's a kind of needs must kind of thing, because with indie developers you kind of have limited resources, so you have to find ways of being creative.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas AAA's run into the problem of they've got too much money, so they get lazy. And it's true, they get lazy.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
so
Darkest Dungeon is awesome. So
go out and buy it.
Yeah,
just do it.
It's a good one. Yeah, why not? For $20, it's
worth it. It is absolutely worth it. Like there's enough content in there to keep you going for hours and hours and hours and hours. So you get your money's worth every day.
Definitely get your money's worth more than some $50 or $60 games on Steam right now. That's for sure. Yeah. So, I guess that about wraps the show up. And as always, if you'd like to contact the show, you can tweet us at 20orLESS podcast or email the show at 20orLESSpodcast@gmail.com. Where can we reach you, Cosmic, if people want to?
You can reach me on Twitter at CosmicEngine99, or you can go to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thecosmicengine. Next week, I will have a Dying Light review coming out. I'll probably have another video out on Thursday as well. So make sure to go watch those.
And he has the early access examination of Darkest Dungeon. So if you want to get a little video peek of,
if you want to go in depth about mechanics,
check
go watch that
out. That's definitely a video I highly recommend. Just like the game. And if you'd like to contact me, you can get me at gteeg on Twitter. That's GTEEG on Twitter, or you can email me at gaddockteeg@gaddockgaming.com. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for watching.
Au revoir.